Welcome to Pit Stops to Podium, the Rev Partners podcast, where we talk to execs who've competed and won, taking their companies from high growth to high scale. My name is Brendan Tollison. I am the co-founder and CEO of Rev Partners, and I'm delighted to have with me today Scott Brinker for this edition of Pit Stops to Podium. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you, Scott. And so just so everyone knows who Scott is his title at HubSpot is a VP of Platform Ecosystem. And really all, in my mind, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a fancy word for saying you really own the marketplace at HubSpot. Is that correct?
Certainly around technology partnerships, yes.
Great. And then, Scott, you also have a kind of a side hustle, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but you're currently the editor at Chief Martech, correct?
Yes, a passion project. As soon as I get done with all my work in marketing tech during my day job, I come at home and I immediately launch into more marketing technology for fun. So yes,
sounds like you're a glutton for punishment or pleasure, depending on who you're talking to. Well, Scott, before we get into our big idea, and it's kind of right in your wheelhouse, but we have a tradition here at Pit Stops to Podium, and that's to get to know our guest outside of work. So, what are 3 fun facts that our audience should know about you?
Wow. All right. Let's see. I started my career writing multiplayer games as a teenager, early years of online. And then the second fun fact related to that, I actually dropped out of college when I was in college the first time around because of that. And then years later, went back to Columbia University as a non-traditional student to finish my degree. So that was a fun adventure. And then, the third thing is actually all that stuff I got into on software was really just kind of a diversion. My original career plan was as a music engineer and music producer, but somehow I haven't quite gotten into that one yet. But
there's still time.
Circle back with me.
So, are you still a gamer? Do you play at all?
Oh, far less than once upon a time. Now Martech is my game.
That's great. Well, hey, let's transition into the big idea today, which is how a partner ecosystem, or really just an ecosystem in general, supports the flywheel. And so let's start by talking about, what are the drivers and the needs behind this concept of moving into a platform type of approach?
Yeah, it is such a fascinating space. So pretty much anyone involved in marketing these days, is aware of this incredible explosion of marketing technology that happened here over this past 10 years. In fact, again, one of the things I kind of did with my Chief Martech, passion project there was over the years, I've actually charted on a graph, a layout of all these different solutions. And, it went from around 150 10 years ago to over 8,000, as of last year. And this isn't unique to just marketing. I mean, we're now seeing the same dynamic elsewhere in SaaS too, but certainly marketing, it's been extremely clear. And it's been fascinating in the sense that the drivers behind this are both supply and demand. I mean, supply side, the ability to create software in the cloud, there are almost no barriers to entry now. I mean, you can leverage, all this super cheap, pay-as-you-go infrastructure from AWS and Google and Azure. You've got all these incredible frameworks and open source. I mean, you can really, if you have an idea, you can get something built, and into market, pretty quickly and pretty easily. And a lot of people do.
Right.
But on the other end, it ultimately only matters if there's demand, to actually take advantage of these things. And what's fascinating is that's been so strong over this time frame too. And I think the reason why is because even though there are a certain set of universal capabilities that most marketing organizations, or more broadly revenue organizations, need to support, digital business, every single digital business out there is still a little bit of a snowflake, and they're always looking for the specific thing that, really works best for them in their market with their audience, or when there's some sort of new technological innovation, maybe a new social media channel, maybe some sort of, new format of how we engage with people. Marketers are, driven by the opportunities to say, oh, let's get ahead of any of what our competitors might do. And so it's been this fascinating thing of between the supply and demand, this engine of incredible innovation within the MarTech landscape, has gotten us to a place where, I don't know. It's not quite the same as the App Store for, iPhone or Android, but in a B2B sense, it's pretty much up there.
Yeah, and it creates a, there's this tension we would talk about is, there's this desire for innovation, like you just talked about, where these marketers want the best of, the best product for their specific need, but then it creates an integration issue when you have this proliferation of tools. There's really a data conundrum. So let's talk about that in terms of that tension that exists between balancing innovation, but also the integration of the tools.
Yeah, no, that's a really excellent point. This was the big challenge of this explosion of the MarTech landscape over the past 10 years is, yes, there was all this incredible innovation and competition and all these things that we should love, but the problem was each of these things kind of got built in its own little world, and it was really falling on the shoulders of the marketer to figure out, all right, well, how do I stitch all this stuff together? And for all the things that marketers should be responsible for, stitching together software is probably not one of the top 10, And so this is why you've seen, even over the years, every time people would survey marketers about, marketing technology, what is the single biggest barrier for you? The answer would almost universally be like integration. Everything else, like we could figure out, but integration, come on, man, throw us a bone. And so this is, the reason why I joined HubSpot was I think this is something that can be solved. I don't think it's rocket science. I think, the leading platforms that sort of serve as the tent poles, of these marketing technology stacks, or again, more broadly, like revenue technology stacks, we need to have the right open APIs and the right open extensibility. We need to have the structures around things like marketplaces to be able to certify and manage, quality inventory that's available to marketers. The developers of these apps need to make sure that they are integrating to the platforms that are relevant to their customers. And if we do our work on those two sides together, then increasingly marketers will be at a place where they can just kind of pull these things off the shelf, and whatever decision logic they're using to decide, I want this versus this other one, the integration element of it, becomes sort of like an underlying truth that works across all of them. Because, you mentioned the thing about data. It's, listen, there's all sorts of wonderful innovation and things we can do that are specialized that might live outside of the context of a core platform. But at the end of the day, if we can't bring that data all back into a common system of record, so that we're able to really take advantage of it across the whole firm, across the entire life cycle of the customer, having that stuff out in an isolated little silo, just really limits the value that we can get out of it.
Yeah, it speaks to the, HubSpot's messaging. Like if you want to be a CRM platform for scaling companies, then you need to have that concept of, as companies scale, that you have the integrations that these marketers or sales leaders or revenue leaders, whatever you want to call it, have access to. Because a company at a certain threshold at one point is going to have different needs that continues to grow. And so having that flexibility is integral into that journey. Well, Scott, let's transition kind of to another idea, which is really around, we talked about, in that last point, you talked about the primary, but there's also tremendous opportunity for those developers that you described in the garage, that kind of that long tail. So what does that look like in terms of balancing, those integrations with some of those big players, but also creating the space and freedom for some of these smaller up and coming, innovative type companies to support companies?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I feel like I've been beating on this drum for a while, where, every time I would publish that crazy MarTech landscape with all these solutions, again, I appreciate why marketers, the integration challenge has to be solved for them to feel joy and not frustration with that. But one of the pushbacks was like, oh, no, this is too many things like this. Just all should consolidate down into one or two or three companies. And part of the fallacy there is this assumption that, the only software companies that matter are somehow those that consolidate into these huge, tens of billions, hundreds of $billion public companies. But that's just not true. I mean, don't get me wrong. We are seeing, that sort of consolidation at the head, of the MarTech tail. And that's fantastic. Those are the companies that are the tentpole platforms, around which these ecosystems grow. But as you go down that long tail, there are just so many markets. And, some of those markets are $100 million. Some of them are $10 million. Some of them are this sort of niche thing that serves a particular kind of business in a particular region, doing a particular, serving a particular audience in a particular industry. And maybe for like the two developers who developed that particular, niche solution, like, oh, well, their business is only going to be worth, $1 million or $2 million in revenue a year. But actually, if it's a couple developers who have done that and they've got the best piece for that out there, and they're each making $1 million, is that a successful software company? I would say yes. You don't have to be like, HubSpot, Adobe. So you don't have to be at that level to say like, wow, we delivered value to customers. We made a great living doing this. And what excites me about ecosystems is that entire spectrum from both ends, the huge $100 billion, public companies down to the two developers in the garage. There's just so many opportunities for them.
I love the way you described it. You mentioned the area and the opportunity. It becomes and there's a communal aspect of it as well, where you have all these different, relationships and ultimately delivering value to different stakeholders. And it's beautiful to see that work in motion. Well, Scott, I really enjoyed learning more about this space. Your passion is evident. What are some practical ways that if our audience wanted to connect with you or with HubSpot, what are some ways that you'd recommend?
Sure. Well, I am at Chief Martech without the H at the end on Twitter. So always happy to engage there. My email at HubSpot is sbrinker at HubSpot. So if you have questions about the ecosystem as a developer, as a potential customer, happy to answer them. And if you want, go check out the app marketplace for HubSpot and take a look at what, that long tail of innovations people are creating. It's some pretty cool stuff.
All right, Scott. Well, thank you for stopping by. We do appreciate your time and your expertise. We'll be in touch soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.